Hello and welcome to Brass Bites. My name is Andy and I will be your host. In today's episode, I chat with a very knowledgeable tuba player, teacher and musical consultant for the Cory Band, Nigel Seaman. Nigel has had a very successful career as a tuba player for the Welsh National Opera and then the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. On top of that, Nigel is well regarded in the brass banding world as a freelance conductor, helping many bands achieve their goals whilst also being part of the creative team, working alongside Philip Harper and the Cory Band. Nigel's influence has carried on through his students as he teaches at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. If you enjoyed episode 2, you are sure to enjoy episode 4 of Brass Bites. Hello Nigel, welcome to Brass Bites. It's a great pleasure to have you on today.
Thanks Andy, nice to be here.
Ideal. So as I say to everyone, take us back to the start, how did it all begin? Who inspired you? What made you start playing?
Right, okay. Well, it's a quite an interesting story, really. I come from, my hometown is in Denbigh, which is up in North Wales. My family, quite musical. In fact, my grandfather, who I never met, he was about 6'6" tall, and he was quite a famous bass baritone locally. And when Bryn Terfel first appeared on the scene, people said, "My God, he sounds just like your granddad." So I'm rather chuffed that Bryn Terfel has been likened to my granddad. That's where the music came from initially. Then in my family, I've got one older brother and two younger sisters. The two younger sisters are very sport-minded when they were young, and my brother, who's my older brother, a very good musician. He's an organist, accordionist, pianist. Now he's retired. He's doing a lot of piano teaching. So this music's been in the family for a long time. So when I was a youngster, I don't know why, but I played the cello at school. And my piano teacher, by the way, was I believe he was an ex-prisoner of war. One of the stories, Mr. Kruger. And my problem is I've got almond-shaped fingernails, which meant when I played the cello, instead of playing it, with fingers like that, I played with fingers like that. Flat finger, which I was told by my cello teacher, "You'll never be any good." I said, "Well, the trouble is, my fingers are sliding all over the fingerboard." Similarly with my piano, I was clacking away when I was playing the piano. I didn't really enjoy the cello, but every Saturday we used to go in the school minibus to youth orchestra in Wrexham, and I had my cello in a soft case. This particular Saturday, put my cello in the back of the bus, took my seat, and somebody who I don't know who is, but I am being eternally grateful to this person because he changed the course of my life. He put his instrument in the back of the minibus, dislodged my instrument, and when he slammed the door, he broke the neck of the cello. So I didn't go to youth orchestra that particular Saturday, and then. What turned out to be my first wife's father became the mayor of Denbigh, and he went looking around his domain in the county hall in Denbigh there, and he came across a locked door, saying to the caretaker, what's in here? I don't know. He said it's been locked for years. So they eventually found a key, and when they opened it, they discovered all the old Denbigh town band instruments, uniforms and music had just been thrown in into this room, and basically the music and the uniforms were rotting away, but of course the instruments were hardy. So he said, right, we can't have them lying here not going to waste, so let's present them to the school on a permanent loan. And so I remember the day when this little open van came along with all these instruments piled on the back, and of course everybody went for the cornets and the trombones and the glamorous instruments. And before very long, of course, once you can play a scale, which is fairly soon, you're then playing hymn tunes. And so this little brass ensemble was playing hymn tunes in morning assembly. They were playing things like Lily the Pink and Congratulations, which is the tunes of the time. And I like the sound of this. So I said to my music teacher, I said, while I'm waiting for my cello to be repaired, can I have a go? And he said, yeah, well, take that instrument over there, which turned out to be a euphonium. See if you make a noise on that. So I took it home, couldn't get a peep out of the damn thing. It was impossible. I mean, later I found out that nobody could have played it because it was a cannibalized instrument. It had been used for spares. So the valves were in the wrong way. There were no valve corks on it, no water key corks, just generally unplayable. So I said, I can't play that. So well, he said, take that big thing in the corner, try that one. Nobody picked that one. And of course, it was a B flat bass. Nobody fancied doing that. So I lugged that home, put the mouthpiece in, and boop, a noise came out the other end. And thereby, when my cello got repaired, we sold it, and I just carried on playing the tuba. So really, I didn't choose the tuba chose me. You know, so as I say, going back to that person who managed to break my cello, had that not have happened, I don't know what I would have done with my life, really. I could have been a butcher, like my dad was, which I didn't like the idea of at all. But anyway, that changed my life. And then went from school. I went to study. I tried for about 4 or 5 places, but I very quickly decided to go to the Royal Manchester College of Music, as it then was. Then, of course, came with the Royal Northern. And my teacher there was Stuart Roebuck. Now, Stuart Roebuck, very, very famous. If anybody wants to get onto his Facebook, his Facebook there is really, fascinating, because he was he was known as the King of the North. And John Fletcher, the tuba player, of course, with the LSO, he was known as King of the South. And the two, they were great pals when they met, which is probably not very often, of course, but when they did meet, they were great pals. And a nice story I can tell you is that when I was at college, Stuart and John Fletcher, they used to have a ritual when they met of not only probably shaking hands, but kicking each other up the backside. And so I happened to say to Stuart that I was going to London to the LSO, playing Belshazzar's Feast, one of my favourite choral pieces, at the festival hall. And so Stuart said, right, he said, bend over. So he kicked me at the backside, and he said, give that to Fletcher. To Fletcher, I said, well, thinking, what's all this about? Anyway, I went to the concert, and afterwards, I went back, found my way backstage into the dressing room, and lo and behold, there was John Fletcher and Dennis Wick and all the rest. And I said, oh, Mr. Fletcher, you don't know me, but Stuart sent me to, right, he said, and he bent over in his underpants. He said, bent over, he said, what? He said, kick me. I said, well, kick me. So I sort of gently tapped him on the backside. He said, no, kick me properly. So I gave him a whack at the backside. And he said, right, now you bend over. He kicked me and said, give that back to Stuart. Of course, when I got back to Manchester for my next lesson, first thing Stuart said was, did you see Fletch? Yeah. So Stuart bent over and I kicked him at the backside. So there aren't many people, I'm sure, around these days who said they had the pleasure of kicking John Fletcher at the backside and giving it back to my tutor. But the story about Stuart, I mean, you'll see on his Facebook page that the people who owe their entire careers to Stuart, and he's probably, I mean, he's up on my wall here, a photo of him. There are just dozens and dozens of tuba players and brass players around the country who owe a great deal to Stuart. When he was a youngster, he was the cornet champion of Great Britain at a very young age, teenage or whatever. Story goes that he was going for a top Z in something, and his lip ripped. And when it repaired, and he tried to play again, of course, there was like a dead spot there, and he was having trouble pitching. So somebody said, well, why not try a bigger mouthpiece? So he actually started studying at the Royal Manchester on trombone. And he hadn't been studying trombone for long when there was no tuba at the college, and they needed a tuba player for one of the college concerts coming up. So they asked for volunteers, and Stuart said, oh, I'll have a go. And he had a go, took to it like a duck to water. And within a very short space of time, he was in the Halle Orchestra, where he stayed for the rest of his playing career. And the thing about Stuart was he was very much a natural player, where you could just pick up the tuba off the trombone, for example. And what he found was, and this is where I think the debt of gratitude comes, when he was teaching, he'd sort of be there with his instrument and say to a student, well, don't do that. No, don't do it that way. Do it this way. And he'd play a bit. And the student just looked sort of, right, not really knowing what Stuart was doing and what he did. And then Stuart realized that really he had to put things into words. And he showed me the table in his local pub, one of those round cast iron tables, the Britannia tables, with a light over it. And he spent ages there, apparently, just thinking, what am I doing when I do that? You know, trying to put into words what he was doing. And it's that he then gave to other students. And so it was not only just a practical demonstration, but you know, going into the nitty gritty of what was doing. And it's that stays with people. And I've been teaching for many, many years. And so much of what Stuart used to say, you know, I find myself regurgitating it like that. And I think that's really what, you know, when there were auditions for tuba players back then, Fletch would put, I remember one particular time he put an American tuba player forward as a real likely candidate. And I think it was for the Bournemouth Orchestra. And then Colin Young, who'd been a euphonium virtuoso in the Salvation Army, he just played tuba and just carried his virtuosity onto the tuba. When the job came up, Colin got it. This American superstar didn't. And Fletch said to Stuart, "How do you keep bloody doing this? You know, you got." And at the time, well, you had the BBC Welsh, you had the Welsh Opera, Birmingham, I think, Liverpool Phil, BBC Scottish, and even today there are people, you know, in jobs who were pupils of Stuart. And so he had, you know, he was famous for that as much as anything else, teaching principal tuba players all around the country. So that's his legacy, and that's really how I came to sort of be where, well, the start of my career. I was very lucky when towards the end of my college career, there was a vacancy at the CBSO, Birmingham Orchestra. I applied for it, and I remember being in a large room, all warming up, quite a number of tuba players warming up. And there was one particular tuba player who was showing off unbelievably, a fantastic technique, doing scales, crab scales in fourths and all sorts of stuff. We were all there, and that person was James Gawley. And my claim to fame is that there were two trialists for the job, Jim and myself. So I did my week's trial with the CBSO, and then Jim's week started, well, we overlapped. My last concert and his first was Symphony Fantastique, which needs two tubas, of course, side by side. Well, Jim sat next to me, he played first tuba and I played second. I thought, blimey, that's good. And the bass trombone said to me in the pub after, I said, I think Uno's got the job. I said, no, yeah, I'm quite happy to come second to that, you know. So Jim got the job there. He stayed a while, but then he of course, his career took him to Zurich, and now he's in Pittsburgh, still fantastically playing the tuba. I've just actually heard him doing the Christmas Carol thing he's put together, multi-tracked, which just sounds very good. And anyway, so I did get that job. And then soon after, Welsh National Opera had the vacancy on tuba. So I think they might have been in touch with the Birmingham, said, you know, have you got a list of people that, you know, were in line? Because I'm not sure if they contacted me or I replied to an advert. But anyway, I auditioned for Welsh National Opera and I got that job. So I was very lucky. I actually only drew 1 week's unemployment after I left college and before I got that job. And I stayed in Welsh National Opera. They were great years. Only a couple of years I stayed there, 75 to 77, because in 1977, what was then called the BBC Welsh Orchestra, they began life as a chamber orchestra. I think 2 double basses, 4 cellos, you know, double woodwind. And in the 70s, mid-70s, they had the sort of sponsorship and finances to expand to full symphonic strength. So in 1977, I think they started with, you know, doing a few extra string desks, and then they expanded to include the tuba, probably a second percussion, this kind of thing. And so I applied for that job because it's across the city in Cardiff, and I got that job. And so my claim to fame, I used to say, I'm the best tuba player the BBC National Orchestra of Wales has ever had. Well, at the time anyway, because I was the only player they'd ever had. I was the first player that sat in the tuba job there. And they were fantastic years, really, because you imagine an orchestra that's been used to playing Schumann symphonies and early Beethoven, the smaller stuff. Suddenly it's got an orchestra, well, over a period of time, it got an orchestra big enough to tackle, the huge romantic works, the Strauss tone poems, the Mahler symphonies and all that. And this coincided with the appointment. I've got a little note here. It was, what year was it? Well, I know who it was. It was Maris Janssens. Became connected with the orchestra. And Maris really was the best thing the orchestra ever had, certainly at that time. It also coincided with, in 1983, the opening of St David's Hall, because up until then, we'd only did concerts in Cardiff City Hall, which was quite small as a stage, and various, there was no big concert hall in Cardiff. So St David's Hall really opened up a massive opportunity for this new expanded, which now became, it went from being the BBC Welsh to the BBC Welsh Symphony Orchestra, and then it changed again to give it a national identity to the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, which it is today. And it coincided then with Janssens becoming our, I think, principal conductor. He must have thought he was in heaven as well, because there he had an orchestra, a full-size symphony orchestra, who'd never played Strauss's Alpine Symphony or Ein Heldenleben or Mahler 5. So we were quite good. If you went to the Berlin Phil and told them how to play Beethoven, I think you might come away with a flea in your ear, really. Whereas, of course, he had this completely malleable orchestra that was learning the big repertoire. And I remember one thing in Tchaikovsky's, we were actually at one time the most televised orchestra in Europe, because corresponding to the opening of St David's Hall, Mervyn Williams became the sort of head TV guru at the BBC in Cardiff, and he was real go-getter, and he managed to get us series, television series in St David's Hall. We did all the Tchaikovsky symphonies. I think they did Beethoven cycle there, and they were all televised. So we were on the telly all the time on BBC Two. Then this brand new hall with a brand new orchestra with Janssens, who could, as far as we're concerned, he could actually walk on fire, let alone walk on water. A genius for us. I remember the one day he turned around, he said, "Brass," in this big bit, but he said, "Brass, fortissimo? No, only mezzo forte." And we thought, oh, well, we like that bit, And what he said, and then he said, "Woodwind, you play louder." And while we played, we thought, well, blimey, I've never ever heard that stuff there. There was like counterpoint going on in the wind department, which usually the brass obliterated. And of course, he had this sort of graphic equalizer where he'd say, "Brass, just back off," woodwind come out, and completely new textures. So it was just fantastic. And he was asked to go to the Berlin Phil or Vienna or whatever, and he said, "No, I'm not ready yet." He was still very young. And, we had some fantastic tours with him. And then following Janssens, the next big person, of course, was Tadaaki Otaka, Japanese conductor, who was the conductor laureate of the BBC there. And he, again, he worked magic with the orchestra. And they were great years. They were, doing all this brand new repertoire. New repertoire for us anyway. And that's where I stayed for 33 years, really, until I retired in just 10 years ago now. In 2010, I retired from the orchestra. It's a story that as well we'll come to.
I mean, you've obviously had a very, very fulfilling career, doing a variety of things just as a tuba player. It's interesting how you mentioned being from Wales and how you started off in cello and then you saw the light, started playing tuba. We've already had Andy Cressy on.
Oh yeah.
And he had a similar experience as a young boy, and you were obviously his teacher, and sort of seeing how your teacher's influence on you has influenced him, and he's now playing in the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, and also carrying on that legacy, which is absolutely fantastic. as you just mentioned there, that was a nutshell of your career, because not only that, since 1977, you've been a tuba teacher at the Royal Welsh College of Music. And you've just mentioned all those fantastic conductors that really shaped how you listen as a player. I know that's a big thing that you work with us students at the Royal Welsh College of Music. You try to get us to listen to each other as much as possible, to be able to change our own playing to match other people, or just to bring something new in the music. So how, as a conductor and a band coach, what other things do you look for in an ensemble? What do you bring out? How do you shape a piece of music?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to say that I've never had a conducting lesson in my life. Well, I start by saying that, then I say, actually, I have. I've had 30 odd years of conducting lessons, because when you sit in a symphony orchestra, a lot of the time not actually doing a lot, of course, then you're looking at conductors, and you look at how not only they visually do it, but how they rehearse and get the best out of people. Looking at the likes of Janssens, Bryden Thompson, Tadaki, Otica, conductors like that, just look at them thinking, I like that. That's good. That works. That does. And other conductors, we used to call them the bargain basements. The sort of conductors who didn't cost a lot of money, because I suppose for every visit of Janssens, it probably cost the orchestra a great deal of money, because he was big time. I was saying with Tadaki, and then we had these sort of, well, we rather cruelly called them bargain based, or the up and coming youngsters, and they didn't really offer. Some of them didn't offer a great deal at all. Well, actually, they offered a great deal in how not to conduct. Sometimes, when you look at the brass section and go, it's like, well, what the hell does that mean? When do we actually articulate? Whereas others, like Tadaki, somehow the rhythm comes out of his fingers. He'd look at you, no massive gesticulations, just economy. And yet he can do with his fingers and his hands exactly what. So some of it might rub off. I don't know. As far as sort of coaching, sometimes you have to be very inventive. I'm a great one for analogies. I'm always doing analogies. And I think that again comes from Stuart. I remember he used to call. Notes, pure nuggets of gold. Or I remember one time saying these are like jelly babies, all different notes, but they're all exactly the same articulation, just different colored jelly babies instead of different notes. It said none of them have got their heads missing or their legs missing. They're, entities, and it'd be silly little things like that, but they do stick with you. I must admit, if I'm sort of with a group, I'm not really thinking. I just do it. You sort of, I don't know if it's just a sort of an inbuilt thing, but I suppose I've conducted brass bands of the same length of time that I've been teaching as well, and you learn it all the time. One of my expressions is the day you stop learning is the day they screw the lid down. Because you're always learning. And that's, I think, something which some people, they often shut the door as to, learning new things. I go to as many masterclasses at college as I possibly can, because even though it might be, on a totally unrelated instrument, some of these teachers and these, clinicians will come up with things which they think, blimey, that's clever, and then I'll add that to it. There's a quite a spooky thing, really, because when I'm teaching, I use the word fate, F-A-T-E, to my students, because those are the four umbrella. And it stands for fingers, air, tongue, and embouchure. If you get all those right, you're well on your way to doing, to being good at it. Sometimes it could be awkward fingering, but the embouchure is quite easy. Other times the fingering is easy and the embouchures, you're jumping around all over the place. Air, well, that's all to do with the style of the music. If you're trying to play quasi pizzicato and this kind of thing, so I use fate. and often say to student, what's letting you down there? Well, it's the tonguing. Obviously, it's a bit awkward tonguing. So it'll be one of those things. And then I was reading a blog from one of Stuart's pupils, and I can't remember what the four-word acronym is, the four-letter acronym is, but I think one of them, instead of me using air, it's the letter B for breath. And Stuart, actually, and this is well after I finished with Stuart and out on my own, he used a four-letter acronym, which is a different word, but it's exactly the same as face air. I think, well, that's spooky, because I've sort of devised that myself in the last 5 or 10 years. Stuart died in 1994, but I got this really spooky feeling. I was, good God, that this sort of four-letter thing has somehow come to me.
Well, four letters, four valves. It must be a tuba thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely. I mean, we're going to talk about breathing later on. It's I think having a diagnostic tool such as Fate, our listeners can definitely use that to structure practice that they need to practice different exercises, finding the exercises that work with them. I know for me, sometimes my practice isn't as structured as it maybe should be. Like I have a rough idea sometimes, and then some days I'm not as disciplined, but actually having right, what's going well today, what's not going well. If are my fingers cold? Do I need to do something for them? Is my embouchure stable? Obviously breathing and tonguing is definitely something that I need to work on more myself, as well as time. If you wanted to maybe add a fifth letter or T twice, maybe time. I think that's definitely something that affects tonguing. So yeah, we've actually touched on your conducting career slightly.
Before we leave this topic of fate, I just want to give you an example. One of the expressions I use: never let your weaknesses affect your strengths. By that I mean, for example, if you ask somebody, a fairly new player, to do a 2-octave scale from bottom C to top C, the chances are they would go bop, 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 beep, 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 to get to the top, and then they do equal in the way down. They strain a bit, and then they get more facile on the bottom. And that means that in order, I'll then say, well, what's the weakness there? Well, the weakness is the embouchure, the ability to be able to get it top C and back down. I said, so that one weakness is affecting your fingering, it's affecting the articulation, and it's affecting the air. Because, so they said, right, just give me quavers on middle C in the space. Da, 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 da. Fine. Well, that's the strength, that your tongue can go da, 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 right? Now, mime the fingerings. Great. That's another strength. So, but that strength of doing the fingering of the scale is being compromised by the embouchure. So the embouchure is affecting the other three. So the one weakness is pulling the other strengths over. What you need to do is use the strengths to bring the weakness into it. So in other words, I want you to do that scale. I want you to keep articulating, keep fingering, keep playing quavers, and whatever rubbish comes out from the top, just keep going. So what would then happen, in other words, the weakness is being brought on board, if you like. And so what happens, for the first few times, you go, pop, 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 plop, 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 nothing at the top at all. Just, no notes, just articulation. It's great, but you're fingering it right. And after repetition, the embouchure gives up and says, okay, I'll play the game. And then, after a few goes, eventually, it's there to the top and back down again. Do you get what I'm on about? The fact that you hear people
I definitely understand. Yeah.
So if people are practicing, just thinking, what is the problem? It could be, what I call substitution fingerings, awkward fingerings. So, F could be the thing that's wrong there. As I said, embouchure could be some really awkward, extended intervals. but try not to let your weaknesses affect what strengths you've got.
That's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
that was a really, really, really good point. That's something I know myself. I've had to change things in order for everything to fall back into place, and for me to progress as a player. I've had to restructure my playing.
Well, of course, at college there, the rooms are not the most soundproof in the world, are they? And I remember quite a few years ago, I was sitting teaching a tuba, and next door was a trumpet player. And I can't remember what the piece was, but it was a part of probably a concerto or something. And he was a small segment, and he made a mess of it. And then he did again, made a mess of it. Kept making a mess of it, and I just stopped teaching him. Listen to this, and then probably a fluke, he got it right, and then continued into the piece. So I said to my student, "Wait a minute." Went next door, knocked there. Said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm practicing." I said, "Yeah, but you're practicing playing it wrong." I said, "You've played it wrong about 12 times. You got it right once. As a parachutist, that's a very poor success record, isn't it?" And I said, "What shouldn't it be the other way around? You should be sort of playing it right 12 times, and and that's where my expression of the power of consistency or the power of replication comes from. How many times, I'm sure people have done it. I used to do it, perhaps. You play a piece, do something wrong, do it again wrong, again wrong, again wrong. Get it right and think, sussed it. You haven't really sussed it. You just got it right once out of X number of times.
Consistency is definitely key.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I'm teaching, I'll say things like, "How many are we going for?" And they go, "Oh God, it's a minimum of 5." Now this could be an interval, maybe an awkward interval, a compound interval. It could be a bar, it could be a phrase, it could be a whole line, it could be the whole blooming thing. But we're going to go for 5 of them. And you remember the quiz, Going for Gold, or the weakest link, similar sort of thing, whereby you have to, accumulate. I said, okay, we're going to go for 5. In other words, you're going to play 5 consecutively correct versions of it. So you go, "What? Yeah, that's correct. 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 Wrong." They go back again. Correct, 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 wrong. You're getting it right more than wrong now, aren't you, in a sense? And then if you're going for 10, when you get to 9, you can cut the concentration with a knife, because if they get it wrong the 10th time, we're back to nothing. And then somebody once said to me, "I think that's a very poor way of teaching." I said, "Well, it's worked for me. When my students get them to focus and concentrate, and imagine something's really, really difficult, and somebody will turn around and say, "That's really hard, that bit, isn't it?" I don't know. They can say, "No, it's not. I can do that 10 times." It's a psychological benefit as well of thinking that now is no longer as difficult as I thought it was, because I can do it over and over. The power of replication. And it all came right. I can never get his name right. Øystein Bardsvik. He came to college not so long ago to do a masterclass, a recital masterclass. And in the masterclass, he said, he copied me word for word. He says, when I'm practicing, he said, it could be an interval, it could be a bar, it could be a whole concerto. He said, I put 10 coins in a pile on the right-hand side of my music stand. And I play what I have to play. If it's right, I move 1 coin over to the other side. If I get it right again, another coin, until all the coins are onto the left-hand side. But if I make a mistake, all these coins go back to the start and we start again. And I thought to myself, yes, if that's good enough for Øystein, it's good enough for me, because again, he's got the idea of replication. And perhaps we'll talk about Cory a bit later on, but when I go at a Cory rehearsal, that's very much how Phil works as well. And it's this power of replication that Phil uses, I'm sure, with Cory. When Cory won the British Open, there was a huge euphonium cadenza for Glenn Williams to play. And I must have heard him play it probably about 50 times in the band room in the lead up to it. And every time was a virtual carbon copy of the previous, So his power of replication was absolute. And it meant that when he went on stage, we're all human, we can all make mistakes. But when Glenn went on stage, A, he thought, I can play this. And B, the rest of the band thought he can play this. So they went panicking for him. He wasn't panicking for himself. And that's why they walk on stage so nonchalantly, because they know that barring a very unexpected disaster, it's just going to be as it's always been in rehearsal. I use that as a thing. How many times have you been in a band when they kind of said, "Oh, for goodness sake, come on," and then right at the end on a Friday night, it's sort of acceptable, and we get a good result. Tuesday, you're back down there again. So your level of performance day to day is there, and with real effort, it actually goes up to there. Now, the thing about bands like Cory's and your Tredegar's and Dykes and all that stuff, their standard is there all the time. So when they do a performance, it's just like it always is, another way. So, and I've been to a number of bands and, explain to them that, because they usually only pull their finger out on Friday night rather than, keeping that standard high all the time with the power of replication. It's a very, very important thing. If you're learning to drive, the power of replication, doing that reverse maneuver, do it again, until you know you can do it. David Charles is a great one. Listen to him practicing, at college if he's blowing there. It's this idea that you get it right. I don't think I've ever heard him split a note.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the power of repetition. We had Bob Childs on in our previous episode,
right?
And he's very similar. I was asking about how he combats anxiety on stage, and he said you won't be nervous if you I'm paraphrasing obviously, you won't be nervous if you're fully prepared, so just put the work in, and if you know you can do it 9 times out of 10, then that's it. Or 10 out of 10, well, someone like Bob can play anything 10 out of 10 times. Absolutely incredible.
Did he come up with the famous the famous saying that goes around many years: don't practice till you get it right, practice till you can't get it wrong.
I'm not sure if he said that one, but that's definitely the idea.
Older players have often used that as a sort of maxim: don't practice to get it right, practice till you can't get it wrong.
It's definitely true.
I was asked at college once about anxiety, and one of the ways I can sort of make them realise that it's not as bad as it is. Like in college, they got floorboards. Okay, so I'll say to a student, okay, this is an explanation of why you're actually cacking yourself, when you come to play something. Stand on the end of this wooden floorboard, and then walk along it in a straight line, spin around on your heel, and walk back along it again. Okay, they do that, no problem, following the floorboard, and come back the other way. So now, imagine that is across Niagara Falls, and do it again. And of course, they set off. I say, whoa. If that was across Niagara Falls, you wouldn't even get on the damn thing, let alone walk across it. Because if you're on the floor and you should fall off that plank, then you're going to twist your ankle. If it's across Niagara Falls, you're going to kill yourself. And it's the perception of what you stand to lose if you don't get it right. They can get it right, and then the idea being that it's exactly the same width of a plank, it's exactly the same job you're doing, but it's what you stand to lose, if you like. Tightrope walkers don't practice 50 foot up in the air; they practice 3 inches off the floor, don't they, until they get it right. And then doing it 50 foot in the air is exactly the same as doing it 3 inches off the floor. If you know you can do it, then like Bob said, if you've got the confidence to, you do it. That's the main thing. You know it, you do it. Well, that is it, because you just replicate. But you don't. Certainly at college, often, and when I hear other people in rooms practicing, they don't do the power of replication. And I think if people just thought about that, their anxieties would reduce massively. You see people learning to drive a car, and they're gripping the wheel, staring straight ahead like their life depended on it. Well, 6 months after passing a driving test, you're sitting back there, eating a sandwich with your elbow on the armrest, type of thing. You're totally relaxed because you know you can do it. When you're learning, oh my God, this is the scariest thing on earth. There's a lot of psychology goes into it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something we could all think about and put into our own practice. So we've touched a little bit on the Cory Band and how sort of one of the ways that they how they prepare for a contest. So as a conductor, you have had quite a fruitful career as a freelancer, and also in 2015 you were appointed to work as part of the creative team with the Cory Band, and as well as working with previous years with Desford and Brickhouse. What have you learnt from other bands, and how has that affected how you conduct other bands?
Yeah, well, at the last count, there's over 50 bands that I've sort of taken bands to contests or concerts, and every single band is a unique animal, if you like. You know, if you talk about Cory's, for example, Phil never has to slow things down to snail's pace to sort it out in rehearsal. You know, the idea is that in Cory, you come to rehearsal, you know your part, you know, perfectly. So in a way, his job's quite easy, isn't it? You know, it's to shape it, put it all together. It doesn't very often have to scratch his head thinking, how the hell am I going to sort this lot out? You know, because it sorts itself out. Now, if you come down to other bands, and particularly come down the sections, you know, you have to sometimes think on your feet and sort of try to persuade people to do things they don't want to do, perhaps. You know, it's never the same twice, Andy. Never the same twice, is it? You know.
I think that's definitely from playing in bands. No, two bands are exactly the same, even if they're like a village or two apart.
Yeah.
It's definitely you play for where you are, you play for who you are with, which is definitely something to think about.
I suppose the thing is, just say it all depends. No band is the same as another one band, and they all have different, objectives. You know, Cory's objective is to win every contest it goes to and stay #1 band in the world. Well, you can't say that for a band that is, you know, second, third, fourth section, for example. If I go to a band as a guest, all I'm expecting at the end of it is that it'll sound better than when I got there, because then I come away thinking, well, that was worth it, and they'll think, well, that was worth it, you know, and we're all happy. And it all depends on what bands have got, what their ultimate ambition is. You know, I was with one band who will remain nameless, but I not long been appointed there, and I said, right, what's the ambition of this band? Are you happy to just come out of a night, you know, do rehearsal, go down for a couple of pints, and go home, and that's it, just, you know, mosey along? Or what? Oh no, our job is to, you know, our ambition is to get, you know, better and better and give some other bands in the locality a run for their money. I said, well, that's great, because I'm on board with that. You know, let's work hard to improve and take a few scalps, maybe. But somebody at the back row corner said, well, it's only a hobby. I said, oh, no, you know, wrong, you know, because if your hobby was making model aeroplanes, you want the damn things to fly, wouldn't you? And not crash. Yeah, it's a hobby, but it's a hobby you'd like to do rather well, rather than just, you know. But some bands are quite happy. They're quite happy to get out the house, get away from the spouse, blow for however long it takes, then go and have a curry with the lads and a few pints, and that's their banding, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if a band has a corporate ambition, that's the thing what some bands don't have. You know, if they had a sort of mission statement, then when you joined the band, you would ascribe to that mission statement, which would either say we're a band that enjoys going out for a pint, or a band that wants to, you know, come up another section within 2 years or something like that. I suppose that if bands had this mission statement, it would be something you could ascribe to, you know?
I think that's a really important point. Sort of looking for players looking to join a band, if bands sort of had this this ethos that they've come up with as a group. I was listening to a podcast with Sir Clive Woodward, and they had team talks in the England changing rooms, sort of how they are going to behave as a group, what are they working towards as a group, and they all he let the players come up with that. There is a long list of rules, and they all prescribe to it. I mean, I'm not saying that brass band should be like the England rugby team, but having that sort of group mentality can definitely help bands of all levels. And even if it is, we're not going to take this so seriously, as long as everyone's on board, then it should be a great success. And actually, the playing might improve.
Yeah. I mean, again, if I can quote Cory, they don't have a long list of rules. They've got 3 rules. When you join the band, you ascribe to the 3 rules of the band. Number 1, you always play to the very best of your ability. You know, rehearsal, whatever not, but never a duff rehearsal. Number 2, you always go to every rehearsal. You don't miss rehearsals, very rarely, you know. And then the other one, you've got to be a team player, with all that means. You know, that's a very broad sort of heading. But those are the 3 rules. If you abide by those 3 rules, you can stay Cory, you know. But yeah, a mission statement definitely is something which every band should think about.
So as part of the creative team, I know sometimes you might fill in for Phil Harper if he's not there for a concert or rehearsal or something. But I know that you sit in, I know that you sit in the rehearsal rooms with a score for everything. What is your role? Can you just elaborate what you do?
My role is twice a week have the thrill of my life listening to the best band in the world rehearsing. No. Phil is a very, very busy freelancer. He did a lot of freelance play. He's married to a Japanese girl, and they go to Japan a lot, you know, for family and for work purposes. Sometimes he comes to rehearse. I think, well, he was in Sweden last night. He's going to Norway tomorrow. You know, blimey, he's fitted in a chord rehearsal in the middle. Really busy. Not at the moment, obviously, but usually. And it was when Muckle Flugger was the test piece in Perth in Scotland for the Europeans. There'd been a lot of discussion, you know, around about the merits of this particular piece. So I was quite curious, and I thought I'll go along and have a listen to see what all the fuss is about. So I turned up. Oh, Nigel, nice to see you. He said, "Hey, I've got a spare score here. Do you want to follow the score and we'll have a chat about it afterwards?" I said, "Yeah, good idea. Yeah, lovely." So I did the score and followed all this muckle fluggering at the end, and we just had a short, you know, conversation about bits of the piece. And he said, "Are you coming to another rehearsal? You can hang on to the score if you like." I said, "Fine, yeah, I'll hang on to the score. I'll see you next rehearsal." So I came along to the next rehearsal and a bit more discussions again. The upshot was I was invited then to go with the band to Perth to hear them at the European playing Muckle Flugger. And then that somewhere it coincided with the band had a concert in Newtown and Morley. Now there's a cauldron if ever there was one at Morley, you know, up in Yorkshire. Goodness. And Phil couldn't do it, so he said, "Would you take the band to these concerts?" "Oh, yes, please." You know, so I did those 2. Great thrill, as you can imagine. And then Band Cymru came up. You remember Band Cymru, that one that was held on?
Yes,
on
I've had the pleasure of going to Band Cymru because my brother used to study in Aberystwyth. So I just went up for the weekend, saw him. Also, I wasn't playing; I was just watching.
Yeah. £10,000 first prize is you know, not to be sniffed at, obviously. And any as long as you're a band, you could be. You don't have to be brass band, is it? It could be jazz band, wind band, any sort of, you know, accordion band, I suppose, could apply for it. And it was arranged, but Phil couldn't do it. I think he had an appointment abroad, and he said, "Would you take the band to Band Cymru, the first one when it was first held?" I said, "Wow, yeah, okay, lovely." So he picked the program, and we did it, and lo and behold, we won it. You know, nothing to do with me. The band were brilliant, but they won it. And of course, I was getting emails and messages saying, you know, "Great to have you on board and part of the team." And I thought, well, I'm not really part of the team, am I? You know, I'm just a dep, really. Anyway, shortly after, the band was giving a performance of The Planets, all of it, in Dover, of all places. And I thought, I've got to listen to this. So again, I hitched a lift with the band bus, and we went over to Dover and heard the band do The Planets. And all the way back, we stopped for coffee in a motorway services, and Phil's standing next to me in the queue. So I look up, I said, in for a penny, in for a pound. I said, Phil, I'm getting such nice messages. Thanks very much. But I'm not really part of the team, am I? And he said, well, do you want to be? I said, hang on, give me a nanosecond to think about this. Do I want to be part of the team of the #1 band in the world? Thinking he'd say something like associate conductor or something like that, I said, yeah, well, yeah, that'd be nice. He said, well, why did you become musical advisor? I thought, crikey, that sounds a bit posh. He said, well, we discuss nothing technical. It's usually about a musical thing, or depicting this or depicting that. We talk about the shape of the piece. I think he often says he likes a second pair of ears, because often, of course, if you're concentrating on something over there, you're missing something over here, perhaps, and we discuss interpretations and whether that would go down well with adjudicators and or not. Anyway, he said, yeah, fine. So shortly, he said, I'll do a press release. I thought, great. And then, very sadly, John Trotman. The Trotman family have been a Cory Band for over 100 years. They are, they were such a kingpin of the Cory. And John Trotman sadly died. And the band literally went into mourning. It was a very, very sad time. He's such a lovely man. But I was asked at the time to do some either connecting or adjudicating, and I wanted to update my blurb to say I'm connected with Cory, a bit of bull. So I got in touch with Phil. I said, oh, Phil, have you done that? Oh, I'll do it straight away. Anyway, he then elevated me to musical consultant. I thought, good God, that seemed to be even more sort of high-powered than advisor. Consultant. Well, that's what I am. And basically, it means I go to rehearsals. And
it's absolutely fantastic.
We'll sit. Usually, I'm not really called upon to do much until the very end stages of or you might say at the beginning. I'm thinking of doing this there instead of that there. Do you think that'll work? I said, well, let's try it both ways and see what happens. And then we'll sort of come to a decision. Sometimes I make suggestions and they don't get anywhere. It's not mentioned at all. But then Phil might say in reverse, I've had a chat with Nigel and we're going to do this. I think, oh, thank you, great fun, And sometimes the little things we've decided between ourselves has been, the icing on the cake for a winning performance. So, yeah. So, that's basically, it's usually just toward the end, he said, how does that sound, Nigel? I said, marvelous. my consultancy, it sounds brilliant,
Yeah, it's amazing. It must be a great way to spend life, especially after the career you've had.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like when I sit and listen to in the band room, Helen Williams, her flugelhorn is pointing straight at me, and she never ever plays less than brilliantly. And so some nights there, my chin's going. She's playing something really heartfelt, and in rehearsal where she's no business. In some bands, you have no business to play with, heart-rending stuff in a rehearsal. But I said to him, "Oh my God, Helen, that is absolutely beautiful playing." And it's just the, if you turn up at Cory at 6:45, you're not the first person there, and that's our 7:30 rehearsal. Often the band will start at 25 past because everybody there and everybody's warmed up. It's a model of what every band should. It's what every band should aspire to. I know there's people out there saying, "Oh, well, they're Cory," but you've got to have a model in life. You've got to have something that you look up to, and you think, why are they the band they are? Because yes, they've got brilliant players around the stand, but they've got brilliant players who play brilliantly all the time. They don't just pull the finger out now and then. And so you can go to rehearsal. For example, if they're so musically astute and musically aware, the band can sight read a new piece, big test piece, sight read it, and then it's got blemishes, it's got, ensemble stuff. But then Phil might say, right, back to the beginning, do it again, and already it's better. It's as if even when they're sight reading, they are aware of, oh yeah, that goes with the basses and that, and with the trombones there, and it knits itself together. They're so musically aware And it's witnessing that is I find so exhilarating. I think, you know, they're more professional than professional in many respects. Because when the stick comes down, you can cut the concentration with a knife. It's high-powered rehearsals. Yeah, no mucking about.
Yeah, it's I've witnessed a couple of rehearsals, and it's very, very interesting to see how everything fits together. As far as an extra pair of ears is concerned, for those studying for grades or doing recitals as a soloist, don't be afraid to go out and get another pair of ears. For those auditioning or have done auditions, you might audition somewhere before the place that you want to go as audition experience, and also to get another set of ears, whether it be your friend or maybe a consultation lesson. I know, Nigel, you sometimes do those consultation lessons. It's definitely worth doing, just for reasons like that, just so you can find an extra piece of music within the phrasing, just to elevate it another level.
Well, because it's always going to be beneficial. One of my students at the end of career, he was going to, again, no mentions of names, but he said, I'm going to apply for, I think it was the Philharmonia job when John Jenkins passed away. But, you know, it's going to be my first audition. He said, you know, do you think they'll listen to me? I said, if they give you an audition, yeah, go, because it's your first audition. Then when another job comes up, it won't be your first audition again. You know, you'll know what it's like to do an audition. So if it's a baptism of fire with the Philharmonia, so be it. I said, you know, if they give you an audition, take it up. And you're right, because just going back to contesting, it's when people, let's start again. When Cory do a concert, it's usually full. So the band are used to playing to a full hall with all those eyes looking at them, and so when they do a contest, it's no different. It's just an extra pair of ears listening in the box. But some bands you go to, they do a concert, and there's so many people looking at them, they get terrified, because they just think, everybody's looking at me, you know. So the more exposure you can get, as you're just saying now, you know, to play to other people, to get their opinions, then you become accustomed to it. Again, it's all about being familiar in those. That's why, in a sense, you do performance classes at college, isn't it? The idea there is that you walk in, you announce your piece, you play it to your peers, and then if they want to make comments, they do, and sometimes they're very, very astute ones, you know, as to how they liked your performance or what little nitpicking they might do.
Yeah, it's definitely something that some of the comments, even from the accompanist, we're very lucky to have Chris Williams here.
Oh, yes.
And stylistically, he knows everything in the book. He's very, very intelligent player, both as a soloist and an accompanist. It's definitely we can all learn something from that level of musician. So just taking a bit of it's a bit of a different question now. So for those that don't know, Nigel actually celebrates 2 birthdays. Isn't that right?
It is, yes.
So could you just explain, because you spent some time in hospital, and then you had to focus on your breathing. Could you just elaborate on sort of what this experience is, and how breathing and your professional brass career has helped you recover?
Yeah, I'm getting up for I'm 17 years old. I'm nearly 17 years old, because I started life again back on the July the 31st, 2004. That's my second birthday. My other birthday's in June. I'm not going to tell you what year that was, but I don't know. I was just feeling pretty run down at one point. If I ran up and down the stairs, I used to get a pain in my back. It was really, you know, it wasn't your typical heart attack, arms, jaw stuff pain. I just think, oh, my back's aching again. I'll have to get fit. I'm 51 years of age, and oh, I've got to work out how old I'm now. 51 years of age, and I just need to be fit. Anyway, I got feeling worse and worse, and I went to the doctor. Said, actually, I barged in there saying I feel really dreadful. He did a ECG and said, that doesn't look right. Sent me to the hospital in Cardiff. They did tests, by which time I was coughing and spluttering a lot. And they came and told me, you're a very sick man. I said, am I? You know, I felt fine lying there in the bed. He said, yeah. He said, you've got your mitral valve is knackered, and you've got blocked arteries. You're going to have a quadruple bypass and a new valve fitted, and we're going to do it now. Oh, it was sort of emergency. Well, 8 o'clock in the morning they did it. It was sort of 10 o'clock at night they said that. They told me that I had a 80-20 chance of survival. They told my family it was 60-40, so there was quite a bit difference in my chances of survival. And basically, I had a massive operation. It put me in hospital for 12 weeks. I had relapses in terms of I had a tracheotomy in the neck because I couldn't stand I was on life support for quite a while at that time. I didn't see August that year. It was just didn't happen as far as I was concerned. I had lots of heart attacks, you know, but they have them, fibrillations and stuff like that, and bring me back to and officially I wasn't meant to survive. I was electrocuted back 7 times in one day. The last time they put the national grid through me, apparently, to try to keep me going again. And eventually, anyway, I came around. And one thing that had happened during this sort of comatose period was that I'd lost the breathing reflex in a way, I believe, because I was on life support with the machine. And then they were gradually sort of weaning me off as I got better, thankfully. They started sort of weaning me off the machine. So at nighttime, during the day, they would sort of turn it down. At nighttime, I'd be properly ventilated. And the Olympics were on at the time. And I was watching the Olympics on the telly. And if I didn't breathe of my own accord within, was it 8 seconds? If I didn't actually go like that, then the machine would take over and bleep. And then the nurse said, Nigel, keep breathing. I'm sorry. So while I was awake, I had to think about breathing all the time. And eventually, you know, obviously they weaned me off the machine. I was able to fly solo. And I remember a physiotherapist coming along one day, a very petite young lad. And I'd lost a great deal of weight, so I've been rather overweight prior to the operation. And this little petite physiotherapist came along. She had lots of diagrams about, you know, where the diaphragm was and the breathing and what we're going to do. She's going to give us some exercises. And then she told me what to do. I'm going to put my hands underneath the rib cage. And when I say go, I want you to take one, as I've explained, take one of these deep breaths I'm asking you to take. And of course, being a tuba player, we're quite used to taking deep breaths. And she wasn't, you know, I was 51 years of age. Everybody else in the ward was far older than me. And some of them, heavy smokers, couldn't breathe very well on their own at all. Anyway, so I took a deep breath. She went, oh. And I sort of, it's okay. I've done this before. And they've said subsequently, the fact I was, you know, a brass player that was doing breathing, I could breathe properly rather than clavicular, then that was a big help in my recuperation, really, you know. Yeah, so luckily I didn't have to learn very long. It was, you know, nature took over, and but there was a time when I actually had to concentrate on breathing, otherwise the machine did it for me, which was quite spooky. So that was it, yeah. And everybody thought that I wouldn't go back to playing again, but that was September. And I remember looking at the advanced schedule for the BBC, and at the end of January, I could see that they were going to perform a Prokofiev, was it Prokofiev Bartok, a piano concerto. And I knew that the tuba was only in the last movement, and it was a very small part to play. And I said, that's the concert I'm going back on. I set myself that in 2 months' time, 3 months, that's when I'm going to go back to work on that dead easy piece there. And thank God I did. I got better. And the BBC were very kind. They had a standby tuba sitting next to me in case I couldn't do it. Cheeky so-and-sos. But anyway, yeah. And then it's what I've always thought that that's the start of a second life, because really what I've done with my career since that time has been, even more than what I'd crammed in before. So, yeah, I shall be ever grateful for the National Health Service.
Yes, aren't we all? Especially in these times.
Absolutely. I won't have a word said against them.
Absolutely, absolutely fantastic. And actually, because you've had to break down breathing a little bit more through brute force, I'm going to say a sentence now that might annoy you. You breathe from your diaphragm.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes. That's brilliant.
So we've come to the apex of this breathing. You're known for one of your first lessons to any of your students at the Royal Welsh College is all about breathing and being efficient as a machine as possible. So you don't breathe from your diaphragm, do you? It's an involuntary muscle. Could you just dispel some of the myths that go about breathing?
Yeah, well, it's actually, it's in a way a little bit annoying, distressing. I mean, it wasn't long ago at college, I had third-year students standing up there. I said, okay, you've all been told to use your diaphragms, haven't you? Yeah. I said, okay, first of all, point to where your diaphragm is. And they all point at their belly buttons, don't they? Diaphragm's down there. I said, no, it's not there. It's not that little circle around your belly button at all. That's nothing to do with diaphragm. That's your lower intestine. And so if you don't know where it is or what it is or what it does, asking you to use it is like asking people to use their clack valve. What the hell is that? It's this thing, right? So, well, basically, it's no excuse today. This is what annoys me. When I was a student, if you wanted to find something out, I used to have to go to the library in Manchester and look it up in a book. There was no computers, there was no internet, there was no mobile phones. Think of a time like that when if you wanted to find something out, you had to go to the Central Library in Manchester and look it up in a book. And these days, there's just such a vast amount of stuff. Half a dozen keystrokes, and you can get X-rays of live people breathing, and you can see exactly what's going on inside their bodies. And of course, the diaphragm is nowhere near where they think it is. The diaphragm is, as you rightly say, is nothing to do with exhaling. If you look at any textbook, I've got a few. If you look at any textbook, you say that the diaphragm is a muscle of inspiration. You only use a diaphragm when you breathe in. It basically cuts your body in half. If you take a line just underneath your rib cage and go right round to the back, that's this sheet of muscle, domed shape sheet of muscle that really cuts your body in half. Above it, you've got your heart and your lungs. Below it, stomach, liver, intestines, etc. And when you breathe in, this muscle contracts and it flattens. And what that does is it creates a vacuum inside your upper body. Nature abhors a vacuum, so that then forces the air to fill the vacuum, thereby, and then your lungs are like, if you like balloons, I suppose, elasticity of balloons. They fill with the air. And then when you breathe out, all your diaphragm does is just relax back to its standing position. If you're breathing out with any, you can't do that with your diaphragm. It just relaxes. It only is able to contract and then relaxes. And the way you expel air out of your lungs forcibly is with intercostal muscles, all the muscles in the transverse abdominis, loads of different Latin names for all these muscles of the chest that can squeeze and do that. So yeah, when you say use your diaphragm, it annoys the hell out of me because and I'll admit it here now publicly that I thought that myself. That's what I thought the diaphragm was. And Phil Sharts, who is the trumpet player at the BBC, I think we spent a whole coach journey from South Wales to North Wales arguing about the use of the diaphragm, because I held on to this idea that the diaphragm is used to breathe out. And of course, he knew better, and he knew correctly. And it made me sort of really look into it in a lot more detail. There's, let me just, it's just to hand here.
Well, I know recently that Philippe has done a class on breathing at the Cardiff University for the music students.
Right.
And I think, to quote one of the students that was in the class, they said, Philippe said, the diaphragm doesn't do as it seems. And it's definitely, he's right. So what's Nigel's...
Unfortunately, you hear very eminent people conducting bands saying, use your diaphragm. And sometimes I feel saying, no, don't bloody use your diaphragm, it has nothing to do with diaphragm. But there you go. Yeah, Philippe is a big advocate of that, isn't he? I'm trying to find this study book.
Just whilst you're finding that, just to explain to our viewers, sort of what this all means in practice is, or how you can feel it work, is if you blow out all your air or play a long note until you cannot blow anymore, and then you automatically take a massive breath, and that's because there's the vacuum which allows the air to come back in naturally. It's something that we should all be thinking about. Once you've got that to come naturally, your sound will improve, your like everything, the fate, all of the things in fate that Nigel was on about earlier will start clicking into place.
There's a book here, I'm the right way around, called The Embouchure. That's my little Bible. There are many books. And it's got some pretty basic pictures. Do you see there? There's the lungs on the top, and that dark line there, that is the diaphragm, and underneath is the stomach and the liver. And when you breathe, basically that flattens, creating that vacuum inside there. And that's, if you cut somebody crossways, that's what the diaphragm looks like. It's a sheet of muscle that goes right around the body with 3 holes in it, one for the spine, one for the blood to and from the heart, and one for the gullet rather. And those are the muscles you use when you're breathing out forcibly. But it's so easy for anybody, just go on the net and say the use of diaphragm in brass playing or something like that, and you'll get hundreds of pages. And it's just a proven medical thing, but there is a fantastic X-ray I saw online of the body breathing, with everything there in motion. You can see what's going on. There's another one of articulation. That's spend another afternoon on that. What happens when you breathe and when you articulate as well.
If I can find those videos, I'll stick them in the description below this video, so that those that are interested in seeing how this all works on a X-ray model, then you can go view that. So
a good way of seeing how your diaphragm works is to run a cold bath and and jump into it. That's how you breathe in quickly using an open throat and diaphragm.
I
do that.
Probably won't do that, but who knows? So I just want to say thank you for all of your time that you've given us today. You've said some very interesting things. It's you've given us some things to think about and some points that we could all use. So basically, with all this advice, it's up to you whether you can take it or not. And my advice to anyone.
That is brilliant, because that's what the word advice means. I'm not telling anybody what to do. Advice, sometimes, advice is offering something which you can either accept or reject. That's fine. That's exactly what advice is. And you're right. Go ahead.
And this is episode 4 now. And some of this advice is actually, it coincides quite a lot with some previous advice that we've had. Now,
Good.
So on the theme of advice, final question, and really thank you from us here at Brass Bites. If you could leave us all with one last piece of advice as a player, musician, person, what would it be?
Have the most open mind in the world. Learn as much as you can, read as much as you can on anything like it, but certainly to do with, but there is so much more to the mechanics of brass playing, which people either don't know about. But I mean, enjoy it. Whether you're playing in a village band, just for pure enjoyment, or whether you want to be part of one of the best bands in the world, just enjoy it and commit to it.
That's great advice. Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Nigel. Fantastic. Nigel certainly has a lot to share with us, so a big thank you to Nigel. Let us know if you enjoyed this episode and check out our other episodes. Don't forget to like and subscribe to receive notifications when another episode is released. Check us out on social media at Brass Bites, where you'll hear about up and coming episodes. But for now, keep blowing and I'll see you next time.